Tonight, Scott Lobdell has seemingly forgotten that Superboy and Teen Titans are two different books. Deathstroke shows us the importance of having regular family dinners together, and we may finally learn the answer to that all-important question, what in the hell is a tanga? All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 28 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host, and do we have a packed week this week. 16 comics came out from DC this week back in 2012, and full disclosure, I have a vacation planned this weekend, so I'm filming this ridiculously early for even my standards, and I have to leave in about now, so I'm just gonna speed right through this if this is all right for you. So, March 14th, 2012 had 16 comics, including the number 7 issues of Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Batwoman, Superboy, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 6 issues of My Greatest Adventure and the S.H.A.D.E, and the number 4 issue of The Ray. A lot of ends of arcs going on this week, so luckily a lot of big old fight scenes that don't require a lot of explaining. Should be able to move through it pretty quickly. But regardless, let's go ahead and jump in, as we always do, with the Bat family first. Batman and Robin number 7, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Patrick Gleason. We left off last issue with nobody torturing Damian while Batman has to sit and listen, and this issue picks up right there with him continuing to do so as Batman's making his way to the GPS tracker. And nobody straight up tells him, like, hey, I'm just going to kill your boy now, okay? I'm just going to use my sonic powers to turn his heart and lungs into paste. And we see Batman driving with, I think, the Batmobile off of a bridge over onto a boat that's passing by underneath, and of course the boat is nobody's, so he crashes into the roof. And then the rest of the issue is basically just one giant brutal ass fight scene where nobody just goes on and on about, like, you took my father from me because you made me appear worthless in front of him, and you're a parasite and you ruined my life, but the world's gonna not have a Batman, it's going to have a nobody. And Batman just goes on, like, you are just a spoiled little kid looking for daddy's approval, and the one person who actually gave you approval in life was your mother, and you killed her. You're an asshole. And he straight up just, they fight and they dive off this, like, catwalk thing, and they land right next to the vat of acid. And as Batman comes to, he picks up nobody and throws him into the vat of acid and starts holding him down in there. Which, yeah, it looks like he's going to kill him. But he looks over at Damian and sees his face, and he's like, okay, all right. And he pulls out nobody and tells Damian that they're leaving. And Damian's like, did you honestly think I betrayed you? And he's like, no, not for a second. Okay, maybe for a second. And as he's leaving, Batman starts trying to clear out some of the wreckage so they can escape before the ship goes down. And nobody looks over at Damian and is just like, don't disappoint me, Damian. You know I'm going to be back and I'm going to try to kill you again. This is your only chance. And so Damian, with Bruce watching, does the forehead poke thing, of course incorrectly, and he kills Ducard. And then he looks at Batman and says, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, with his fingers still, like, in the skull of the guy. So, yeah, short but brutal issue. Definitely very, very well plotted out. It definitely feels, you can feel the anger coming from Batman the entire way through, and that he is, like, really, really close to breaking his rules here. And when it comes to the acid scene, like, yeah, no, it seems like he's straight up just going to leave this guy burning in acid. And of course, it's seeing Damian and realizing he has to be better in order to get past that. It's a solid issue all around. Art-wise, it's the same it has been. Nothing too amazing about it. I still think that the heroes in the masks look better than the demasked versions, but maybe that's just me, just a bit too heavy on the shadows sometimes. So overall, no. Yes, it's a short issue, but it is a fantastically well done one. And it definitely sets up like, okay, after all of that, after everything we've been through, Damian killed the guy. He straight up committed murder on a guy who, while he probably would have come back, was not a threat at the moment and was not like an issue. So yeah, no, it's definitely setting up an interesting way moving forward for Damian. How we're going to rectify that moving forward, I don't know, but it's definitely setting up some interesting plot beats that they can tackle later on. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 7. A lot of that comes down to just that last few moments, because everything else, it's a fine fight scene, and you definitely feel the brutality of it, but in the end, it is still just a long-ass fight scene. And I get it, it's fine, but it's the most basic superhero comic thing of just like, okay, and now we're just going to have an issue devoted to nothing but the fight, and then, maybe a little bit of story at the end, which they did, and it was a good thing, but it still is mostly fight. So 7 for that. And we got one more issue left in this trade, and I'm interested to see how Batman squares the circle of Damian killing people again. Batgirl number 7, written by Gail, Simone, art by Ardian, Syaf, and Alitha Martinez. The start of a new arc, and we pick up in media res of Batgirl being drowned in a sewer by somebody who apparently has metahuman strength. And she's sitting there thinking like, oh, geez, is it weird that my last thought is that I'm so happy that I'm dying in a sewer that's actually just rainwater and not sewer water. Ha, ha, ha. But she ends up using a grappling gun to knock this guy's mask off. He has like a Japanese Oni mask on. And she knocks it off and catches her breath for a second. And then the guy's like, wait a minute, you knocked my mask off. That makes you interesting to me now. Okay, bye. And then he just disappears. And Batgirl, again, goes to catch her breath. Then we go to 2 hours ago. Batgirl is flying through the city, and she goes to Black Canary's apartment, knocks on her window, and is just like, hey, I'm kind of going through some stuff. Could we fight and spar for a little bit? And she's sparring with Black Canary, and Black Canary comments of like, look, you've got all the moves down. You like mentally know it. You're smart enough there, but you are relying on like your shock plates in your suit to stop the hits. Your muscle memory is gone because of your time in the wheelchair. So you have to build that back up. And we see Batgirl talking about like, yeah, you're right. I've been hit a few too many times by the past 2 villains of my series. And she lands a few good hits on Black Canary, but Black Canary eventually gets her in an armbar, and then Batgirl does a somersault to get out of it. And as she's lying on her back, she thinks of how the Joker shot her, because that's just never going to stop being a thing. And they sit and have some tea later on, and Black Canary asks her, like, okay, so what's going on with you? And she's like, oh, a whole lot of stuff, but for the most part, my mom's back in town. And then we get one page of Gordon, like Commissioner Gordon, just meeting up with his ex-wife, with Barbara, and it just happens. And then he's basically like, so why did you leave, Barbara? Why did you do it? And she's like, you know very well why. Because of James Jr., our son. And then we don't come back to it. So Black Canary tells Barbara to stop feeling sorry for herself, that she's got a great chance and she needs to make the most of it, and that they are birds of prey. We're going after some guy named Grotesque, who's going to be like hitting up a party tonight. And everyone else is busy, so they wonder if Batgirl wants to take it. So she says, yeah, sure. She goes to the club called, I don't even know what. Point being is that it is run by a billionaire named Theodore Eichlin, who apparently has this really, really, really expensive bottle of wine. And by the time she gets there, the guy, Grotesque, he's already in there with some goons. And he's asking for the bottle of wine because apparently, according to Black Canary, this guy is interested in all the finer things in life and considers himself a collector and blah, blah, blah. And when Eichlin is literally willing to die for the people at the party but not give up his bottle of wine, Grotesque takes a shot at him in the head, in which case Batgirl jumps in and starts bashing skulls in. And as she's taking care of the goons, Grotesque is like, "Oh my, look at her! Isn't she something?" So he uses some sort of metahuman ability to drain electricity from like the power wires, and then use it to mask his escape. And then, as Batgirl checks that everyone else is okay because Eichlin is just straight up dead, she comes across an open manhole cover and is like, "Okay, you went down the sewer." And she goes down in the sewer, finds a couple of the goons down there who I guess he just killed. He just said 2 little cannon fodder dudes apparently discarded. So I guess they died because of him. But regardless, she pulls off one of their masks and sees if she can recognize the guy. And as it turns out, it's one of the dudes who was with the Joker when he shot Barbara. And that, like, freaks her out. And that's where we end. I feel like we're retreading the same ground still, and I understand that it's a long process of getting better and it's a mental thing and stuff like that. I understand that, but it's not even like the words are changing. Everything is the exact same place where it's been. It's just like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this, but yes, I know I can do this. It's getting a little tiring now, 7 issues in. As for Grotesque, whatever. He seems as disposable as Gretel was in the last 2 issues, which was very. Maybe he'll become something more, but I highly, highly doubt it. As for this twist with the Joker thing, I don't dislike it, but it also feels way too convenient of just like, oh man, just as I was starting to get over myself, this thing happens. It's like, yeah, we know. We did this again with the whole mirror thing and all that. So, I don't know. It just feels like the same story told through a slightly different lens, which, fine. It wasn't a terrible story to begin with, and maybe this will have a new twist on it, but I don't know. And then that one page of Barbara and Jim Gordon talking. Like, I understand you have to forward that plot a little bit, but it just felt so out of nowhere because Jim was just like, "Barbara, what are you doing here? You know I had to leave, Jim." "Of course." Done. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Overall, I'm going to give this one a 6. Art is okay. It doesn't really stand out. It's more house style than anything else, but it is fine. My biggest qualm is, of course, yeah, it just feels like the same thing over and over and over again, and maybe it's going to have a different twist to it, but we'll see. Batwoman number 7, written by W. Haden Blackman and J.H. Williams III, art by Amy Reeder. Last issue had a whole bunch of intersecting plots, but the main part of which was Batwoman was attacking the hook-handed guy who killed Bet in some underwater lair of Medusa, I think. This issue picks up, same thing. He's basically threatening her, being like, "Hey, you remember that blonde chick you killed? Well, now I'm going to attack you because I'm going to make sure you can never hurt anybody again." And she throws him around and then rips off his hook hand, which there is a voice coming from the hook saying, "Don't take my body from me." And you see that the hook is actually like sentient and it's latched onto this guy and actually like transformed him in some way to be like this big bloated like muscly dude, whereas normally he's just an average looking guy. I have no idea what this is. Apparently the guy's name is Rush though. Fine. Anyway, as she's trying to figure out what's going on, the leader of the Medusa or whatever, Falchion, I'm going to call him, he steps up and he's got his own little monster squad here and it's just like, "Oh, don't worry, Batwoman, I love all my monsters." And yeah, we see the entire horde of them. We go back 3 weeks ago to Jacob Kane's story. He's in the hospital with Bet, and he's just recounting like how Beth and Kate were pretty identical growing up, but they just had little idiosyncrasies that kept them different from each other and showed how they were always different. Just a little bit of characterization. 2 weeks ago, Kate is having dinner at a sushi place with Maggie, and Maggie is a little bit concerned about the sushi. She never had it before, but Kate's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. What doesn't kill you make you stronger. Hold on a minute." And she walks outside because she sees a guy going out there named Abbott, who, again, I don't know. He's something about a werebeast cult. Feel like I may have missed that bit, but regardless, Batwoman says, like, Abbott, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, Medusa, they're moving in, trying to move us out of Gotham. He's just like, all right, well, stay out of my life. You suck. And then he leaves. And Maggie's like, what was that about? She's like, don't worry about it. Let's go eat our sushi. We go to Morrow's story, the evil guy, who's got three women kidnapped along with Killer Croc there helping him out. And he's like, oh, you said you would help me get stronger. And he's like, yeah, don't worry. I just need your help on this one thing. We're going to summon Bloody Mary. Literally, he gets in front of a mirror with the girls, says Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. And this blonde, bloodied woman shows up and says how she's going to eat his face. And Morrow's like, no. I know your true name, therefore I have control over you. You will work for me in my Medusa cult. And she's like, well, you need to give me a face if you're going to follow the rules. And she's like, yeah, no, I got 3 girls here. Go ahead and eat up. So Bloody Mary starts eating all their faces. Then we get Maggie's story 1 week ago. She is with the GCPD attacking a heavily, heavily mutated Killer Croc. Like, he is just full-on crocodile with, like, 6 eyes now. And they're like, okay, well, this is a thing now. And Killer Croc is literally eating the people on his side at the same time. So as the rest of the Medusa cult are trying to escape, there's some lady here who I don't recognize, saying her name is Soon. And she's like, all right, you guys run back to Falshun, and I'll take care of things here. And also, don't worry about Abbott. He's no longer a complication. So something happened to Abbott. But Maggie jumps in the back, gets Soon into handcuffs, and says, like, all right, we're going to put you in the sweatbox until you tell us everything you know. Then we go to Chase's story 1 week ago. Basically given new tech to Batwoman, including a throwing dart that is sentient and responds to vocal commands, and new electrifying gloves. And apparently the entire mission is that Batwoman needs to break into the GCPD to get Soon out of custody because they need to be questioned at the DEO. Like, it's just a thing of, all right, well, need to get our hands on her because it's a bigger deal than they think it is. So then we cut back to now. We're in the Medusa lair. We see the mutated Killer Croc. We see a new La Llorona ghost. It's a same water ghost looking lady. And we see Bloody Mary. And Falchion standing over them all being like, oh, look what I've done with the power of belief here in Gotham. Because you guys believe in some really messed up shit. Anyway, let's see what you'll become when you become part of my monster squad. And Batwoman's like, all right, let's get on with it. I like it. I think it's solid. I don't know. I'm a little bit iffy on the fact of, this jumping around storytelling. Admittedly, it's a present moment and then a leading up 2 weeks, 1 week, 1 week, now sort of thing, like back to now. So it's not that much out of order, but it is a little bit confusing of where different things take place in relation with each other. I feel like it would just be easier to do I feel like the only one that's really giving me trouble is the civilian stuff. The Kate with Maggie stuff and the Jacob in Bet's hospital room. That stuff's the only stuff where I'm like, where does this really fit in? How does this... Is it going to inform the story moving forward? Like that Abbott thing? But again, I don't know who Abbott is, so it didn't really help me there. But no, I like the story that's telling. Amy Reeder's doing a great job on art. The layouts aren't quite as fantastical as they were with, I think it was Haden Blackman on the last arc, but it is still different. It's different than you're going to see in any other comics. So I'm enjoying that at the very least. Overall, I'm going to give this one a 7. I think it's very well done, but it does still have room to improve. So we'll see what they do in the continuing sections of the story. Probably keeping the out of order storytelling, which is kind of a letdown, but I'll get used to it. Superboy number 7, written by Scott Lobdell and Tom DeFalco, art by R.B. Silva and Iban Coello. We left off last issue with Superboy meeting up with Supergirl, making a beeline over to Nowhere Labs in order to fight Templar, but then running into Rose, who was also looking for her own fight. This issue picks up with Rose literally just getting tossed out of the way, and she's like, yeah, you make a good entrance, but is that all you got? And she's like, dude, stay down, I'm going to take care of Templar. And he just beelines it through a wall as Rose gets back on her feet and just be like, all right, well, this looks like it should be fun after all. And he makes his way through the facility and realizes, like, all these techies, like, he just zooms past them. He doesn't even care. Even security guards who try to stop him, he's just like, all right, bye. And he uses his telekinesis to scan the entire building for how many people are in there. And he tries to send everybody out to an emergency exit by collapsing a beam down onto a vacant lab. That's getting the warning alarms going. And as he does so, he's attacked by Center Hall, who's like, hey, Superboy, we got a big old gun. Something that's like anti-tank blasters. No way that you should be able to deal with it. And Superboy gets up and just be like, except I can. And he knocks out the entire team. And as soon as he reaches Center Hall, he's like, oh, please, not again. And Superboy just kicks him through like multiple walls. And as he's staggering for a second, because he's like, no, actually, that gun did kind of hurt. Whew, all right. Anyway, making my way through. And he goes down through to the place where he was actually born. Skipping over a bit here. As he makes his way through one of the hallways, he comes across this city street that just says, like, don't do this. Like, all the signs are like, don't do this, Superboy. Let me take you away. You can escape. And he's like, what in the hell is this? And an editor's note specifically tells us, as the audience, that it's possibly Danny the Street. See the pages of Teen Titans. So anyway, he makes his way down to the place where he was actually like born and made. And as he gets there, he sees his like containment pod has the numbers 02 written on it, meaning he wasn't the first. And then we see some surveillance, some guys watching cameras of Superboy discovering this. He's a shadowy figure on a floating throne. And he's like, it took him long enough to realize that he was not my first. And he's like, do you want me to take care of him, boss? No. Rose is here. And, of course, Rose is there. She kicks Superboy a little bit and gets the upper hand on him because he's a little bit messed up by realizing that he's not the only clone. But she pulls out a kryptonite gun and shoots Superboy in the head. And she's like, man, that was anticlimactic, but I'm glad I took care of you. And, of course, he's like, nah, I'm still alive. And she's like, that's impossible. You can't be alive. And he's like, I'm Superboy, bitch. And then she throws a sword at him, and it goes through his chest. And apparently the whole thing was just a ruse to get his ego up so that his personal force field would be let down, and she could attack. And he does end up passing out and, like, nearly dying. So we cut to later, and Templar and Center Hall have him contained. And they're talking about like how they're going to dissect him because whatever's inside of him could be the cure to Templar's own illness, whatever it is. And Superboy, he's awake for all this, but he plays dead because I guess he wants to learn. And then we get to elsewhere. At that very moment, Caitlin Fairchild wakes up, Dr. Red, and apparently a detective from the GCPD owes Superboy a favor, and so she's watching over Caitlin for Superboy's sake. And she's pissed off at Superboy, like, I had spent 2 years getting into nowhere, posing as a colony, trying to infiltrate colony, and now he's ruined everything. And she's like, what the heck is a colony? And then we go back to nowhere. Rose is walking down the hall, and she's jumped by Wonder Girl, who is like, hey, Superboy kicked my ass in the pages of Teen Titans, so now I'm here to repay the favor. Have you seen him? And that's it. That's the gist of it. This is where the trade ends, and honestly, it doesn't feel like the end of an arc, but then again, it doesn't really feel like there has been an arc, you know? Like, nothing here is particularly, oh, wow, yeah, this is where everything comes together. It's just been building on itself constantly without any sort of good payoff to anything, which isn't to say it's a bad thing inherently. It is. It's not great, but that style of storytelling is inherently bad. I guess this issue is actually probably one of the better ones for me because it isn't just... He's determined enough that I think Scott Lobdell realized, oh, wait, I don't have to have a snarky one-liner or the characters constantly talking either out loud or through the narration boxes. And I like that. I really do appreciate that. And I'm anything he says is purely utilitarian in terms of like, I'm pissed. Here's what I'm doing. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And I like that. So it's, in terms of writing, it's probably the best we've had of this series, if not at least recently. Art-wise, it's the same as it really has been. I couldn't really tell the difference between the pages done by R.B. Silva and the pages done by Iban Coello, so at least the styles blended up pretty nicely. It's fine. It's, in terms of Superboy, it's the most fine of an issue that we've had. It's not blowing my hair back. It's not anything super amazing or fantastic. It's just fine. So overall, I'm going to give it a 6. It's fine. Like, there's nothing more I could say about it. In terms of being the last issue of the trade, it's fine. Whatever. Green Lantern number 7, written by Geoff Johns, art by Doug Mahnke. We left off last issue with pretty much the end of the arc, but Sinestro had a vision that the Guardians were going to replace the Green Lanterns, and he went back and recharged Hal's ring, and Hal was in the middle of getting it down with Carol. So this issue picks up with the Indigo Tribe talking about how Sinestro is bad or something. I'm not entirely sure because it's all in Indigo Tribe talk. So, but yeah, they're all upset. And we zoom in on one of them, who is Black Hand. I only know that because of the cover of the trade. But Black Hand is in the Indigo Tribe. And we cut back to Hal and Sinestro and Carol, and basically Sinestro's like, hey, all right, we got work to do, let's go. And Hal's like, I'm not working for you, I'm not working for nobody, never. And Carol's like, except for me. And Hal's like, except for her. And so Sinestro's like, I'm sorry, are you not hearing me? Like, we got work to do, you come along with me. And he's like, no, I'm done. I don't want to be a Green Lantern anymore. He's like, all right, fine, we'll do this the hard way. And he grabs Carol, makes a Green Lantern pistol, and is just like, come with me or I'm going to put up a hole in her head. And of course, they start fighting because that didn't go over well. And as they're fighting, Sinestro, of course, gets the upper hand because Hal's ring can't do anything to him. And he's like, look, here's what I saw in the book. The Guardians are going to replace us. We got to go. And as they're about to do that, the Indigo Tribe shows up for Sinestro. And Hal's like, hey, guys, what's up? What's going on? And she's like, hey, and the Indigo One, mind you. Indigo One's like, hey, the Guardians made a mistake trusting Sinestro. We're going to take him, and he will be held accountable for his crimes. Anyway, bye now. And as she's attempting to do this, she teleports out everybody from the scene. Sinestro, Hal, everyone except for Carol. Carol, meanwhile, is freaking out trying to help because she realizes this is now a inter-core thing. And she goes into a drawer and pulls out a Star Sapphire ring and becomes the Star Sapphire again. But by that point, everyone's already teleported away. So, yeah. We cut to the science cells of Oa, and the Guardians are there talking to Alyssa Drack, the woman who Sinestro met last issue, who showed him the visions. And basically they're like, hey, we want the Book of Black, the thing that showed the visions. And she's like, cool. If you want that, you got to give me back my Book of Parallax or any other of the books. I want my stories, damn it. And one of the Guardians is about to kill Alyssa because if she doesn't have the book, then she's of no use. But then Ganthet steps up and is just like, no. They'll ask too many questions, like, of why we killed this prisoner if they weren't a threat in the science cells. They have to stay alive for now. And then they talk more about the first lantern coming about. So then we meet up with Hal. He's in a prison cell. And as he's getting his bearings, he also ran out of green energy juice. But as he's getting his bearings, one of the neighboring cellmates tries grabbing his arm and tells him, like, oh, free me, I'll do anything or I'll rip off your arm. And as he's making these threats, he's blasted by indigo light. And we see the person who did it was Black Hand. And Hal's like, oh, hey, I recognize you. What's going on? He uses Indigo Tribe speak, says something about Abensur. And he's like, look, I don't understand. Could you speak English? And Black Hand tells him that Sinestro is going to be saved. You must not worry, Green Lantern. And we see Sinestro is being held captive, prisoner, whatever, by the Indigo Tribe, who are about to do something to him. And that's where we leave off. So, in terms of the Green Lantern cores, having not read the previous stuff Geoff Johns had done leading up to the New 52, I feel that one of my biggest blind spots is Indigo Tribe. I am aware of a lot of Red Lantern stuff because they have a book. Green Lantern, obviously. Blue Lantern, just a little bit. But Indigo Tribe is really one of the biggest blind spots for me. So if we're doing a series exploring that a little bit, I am more than okay with that. It's a good way to do so for new quote-unquote readers. That being said, why are they jumping into this now? I don't know. What does Ab and Sur have to do with anything? I don't know. How is Black Hand going to play into it? Something big, because it's called The Revenge of Black Hand. So I guess we'll find out. Overall, though, fine issue. I like how Carol's back in the ring, especially after they took that whole issue to say how we don't need the rings anymore. So I'm going to give this one I think just a straight 7. I think it's fine, but there is a lot of room for improvement there. Just because we're setting things up. There's nothing that's really happening yet. It's all just getting the pieces where they need to be and saying, oh, here's the inciting incident. So yeah, it's got room to improve, but it is still a very good issue on its own. Mr. Terrific number 7, written by Eric Wallace, art by Gianluca Gugliotta. We left off last issue with a pretty much just an unrelated one-shot, and this issue picks up with a pretty much unrelated one-shot. It does set up a couple of the through lines for the final issue, but we have a port of Los Angeles, and they hear some huge-ass loud cocoon noise as something apparently hits the docks, but they can't see anything. And then all of a sudden when they look up, there's this giant ocean liner there, just appears out of nowhere. And as they try to approach it to find out what it is, where it came from, they are repelled back by some sort of force. And they're like, oh boy, the ship's haunted. We got to get a superhero down here. So then we cut over to West Hollywood, where Mr. Terrific is talking to some guy about how, oh man, nobody puts any stock in their own life anymore. Everyone thinks it won't happen to them, blah, blah, blah. As we see this young kid wearing headphones crossing the street. And, of course, he doesn't hear some car coming, and Mr. Terrific swoops over, gets the kid out of harm's way, and he's like, now remember, child, you look both ways, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, I'm sorry, this was also because it was part of a car chase of the thief stealing something. And Mr. Terrific puts down the kid, tells him, stay safe. And then he uses his T-sphere to create a gravity well, which stops the speeding car in its tracks. Which then this stereotypical ass chef comes out and just like, I tell you what, I give you hot dogs for all of your life. And Mr. Terrific's like, don't worry about it. We're good. We're square. Bye. And then just like none of that ever comes back. Apparently, at Holt Industries, the previous night, somebody tried to breach security. And they're trying to figure out who it is. There's a short little bit here of Jamal, a.k.a. the guy who's going to be taking over after Michael Holt leaves Holt Industries, sending some message to his father, I guess. It says Dad. And then he seems all suspicious, so if that comes up later. But as they go and talk to the scientists who are trying to figure out who broke into the system, Donald's already there, and they're like, oh, so this system's made so it basically plants a tracker inside the person, and it's like, it's hostile, and they'll be sure to show themselves, or else they'll surely die. And at that point, Donald's like, oh, I gotta go take care of security stuff, bye. And he leaves, and he's like, oh God, I'm the one who breached security. What's going to happen to me? And then we get back to the ghost ship, and Mr. Terrific arrives, and they explain everything that I explained to you, and how they're getting some sort of radiation from it, so they think it might be like nuclear bomb waste or something like that. So Mr. Terrific jumps on the ship, does some scans, and finds, yes, there is a giant, like, nuclear warhead on this ship, and it is armed to go off in an hour and a half. And he's like, all right, hour and a half, I can deal with that. That's not too bad. But as he tries to approach it, he hits that same sort of force field. And he's like, all right, well, let me just adjust the range of vision on my mask. Ultraviolet, nope. X-ray, nope. What about gamma? And as he turns it to view gamma radiation, he sees that he's surrounded by all these invisible soldiers. So, of course, the fight scene starts, and as soon as it does, one guy yells out, like, make it faster! And the countdown goes down to just 5 minutes. And so the fighting continues, and he realizes that he's not able to get through all these people and stop the bomb at the same time. So he sets off a T-sphere to reverse the polarity, blah, blah, mumbo jumbo. Point being is that everyone can now see all of the soldiers, including ones that were on the ground outside of the ship. There's a little cutaway here of Donald talking to Steven, which is the bad dude from like 2 issues ago. And he's like, hey, they hit me with something. I need some help. And he's like, yeah. Get back to your house. I'll have a private medical team there. You can't go to the hospital because you literally committed corporate espionage, so you'll go to prison forever. But I'll keep you alive because you could be very useful to me. And then as Donald's freaking out, he cuts open his arm and sees that there's like circuitry underneath. So that's a thing. So meanwhile, the soldiers are all going after the police outside, Mr. Terrific up top, and there's only 40 seconds left on the bomb. The police make their way in, giving Mr. Terrific enough time to focus on the bomb, and of course he disables it, and they're like, and that's why you're called a superhero. We cut over real quick to Holt Industries inside another security room where Karen Starr, a.k.a. Power Girl, just swoops in with super speed, maybe steals something. Hard to say, but she's like, all right, goodbye, Michael, and wherever you are, wish me luck. I'm going to need it. So that's a thing. And then finally Michael goes to his weird ninth dimensional place, and he's like, oh, there was a break-in at Holt Industries. Computer, get the DNA of the person who did it. And the computer's like, here's the DNA. And of course he sees it's Donald. So he calls up Alitha, and Donald is already outside her door, and saying like, hey, you gotta let me in. I'm changing. And he's like, I don't care what kind of person you are. I'm not letting you in. And she calls up Michael, and Michael's like, hey, he's the one who broke in. Do not let him in that door. And then the door explodes, and we see this weird, like, half-human, half-cybernetic freak of nature show up as Donald, saying like, you should have been nicer to me, Alika. And that's it. That's where the issue leaves off. Fine. I mean, we've been setting up this whole, corporate espionage, Donald's going to betray them thing forever. If this is how they want to handle it, him actually being like a superpowered person, fine, if that's the way you want to do it. I'm so bored with this book because nothing matters. Like, in issue 7 of your book, I'm sure you're just going to let this dirty bomb go off instead of just beating it, especially when you're trying to focus on a corporate espionage thing, even if the book wasn't being canceled. Like, no, you're clearly trying to just focus on this one thing, and then everything else is just, we need to have some... Corporate espionage does not lead to a lot of fight scenes. How do we get him into fight scenes? And the answer is whatever thing of the week is happening. So I'm just bored with this book for the most part. I can't really hold it in that high regard. It's okay at best, but I'm going to give it like a 5. Nothing is inherently bad. It's just boring. Deathstroke number 7, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Joe Bennett. We left off last issue with Deathstroke taking on the big bad, taking him out in a electromagnetic pulse. And then we see that the person who's behind all of this actually really and for truly is his son, Grant, who's supposed to be dead. This issue picks up with Peabody showing up to Detroit where the big battle took place and coming across S.H.A.D.E in the wreckage. He really should be dead, but he just lost a lot of blood and his healing factor's kicking in. So they're making a drive back through the city, and Deathstroke's basically just filling in Peabody, but apparently as Peabody's like, okay, look, you can tell me all this stuff, but I'm getting you to the hospital, and you can tell me there as well. How about you rest for now? He's like, no hospital. Look, we need to go now before Grant's location changes. And it's like, oh, you mean somebody has him? And they're like taking him somewhere else? It's like, no, Grant's the one in charge of all this. And he's like, what? So then we see somehow he tracked him down to a house. It doesn't say where the house is, but just a house where they're fighting. And we see him in the legacy armor, the same as the last guy had, except now half of the mask is Grant's mask. And basically this all extends out to one extended fight scene where Grant's just like, you wanted a son you could be proud of, Dad, and this is what it is. Now I'm going to kill you because that's the only thing that will be able to make you proud, because that's the kind of son you wanted. And the arguments that he makes are just like, look, if it was all just business, if you wanted to be the greatest killer of all time, you'd stay quiet. You'd shut up. But the fact is that you don't worry about the business side of it. You don't care about doing that. You want to be known. You want to be recognized. And the reason why is because you are just this broken man who cannot think outside of himself for like 5 seconds. It's the whole reason that you never loved me. And the fight scene is brutal. It's got a lot going on to it. Maybe not as structured as previous fight scenes have been throughout the series, but definitely good. And as Grant is basically about to go for the killing blow, and he sees that Deathstroke is just old, and he's got like tremors in his hand, and he's just basically washed up compared to Grant. And Grant's about to do the killing blow. He's electrified, and the suit is paralyzed. And we see that the parents of the girl who we originally thought were the people behind it, they put the failsafe in the suit that locks it all up because they don't like the fact that Grant lied to them about the relation to Deathstroke. So they come up to Deathstroke and they say, here's the deal. All of the money that's funding this legacy thing is out of our hands. If you kill us, it's just going to keep on happening. However, if you want this to stop, you need to kill your own son. That is the only, so that you know the pain of losing a child. That is the only way that we will we will not come after you anymore, but you have to kill your own son. And Grant's freaking out because he's like, that's not what we agreed on, blah, 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 blah. But Deathstroke stands up, he looks over at his son, and he's like, I don't have a son, and I don't negotiate. And he immediately goes and kills the two people. Takes a few shots to the chest, but overall, they're dead. So he collapses. Grant, because they're not paralyzing him anymore, stands back up, and he's got the sword raised over his head, ready to chop off Deathstroke's. He just has a moment of realization, and he drops the sword and walks away, with Deathstroke, the mother and the father, all just lying bloodied on the ground as he leaves. And that's the end of it. Okay, I mean, I like it. It was definitely it didn't really do a lot in terms of forwarding a narrative, but it did a lot in terms of forwarding the plot of, we set up this whole Grant thing, the backstory, how they fought with each other, their relationship. We set up these parents. This is we have one more issue left in this trade, but this feels like the end of the arc, where it is, okay, Grant is still alive. He's out there for Deathstroke. He let him live because of his own thing going on. Like, this added depth to the characters that has been there the whole time, but it really brings it to the forefront. Art-wise, it's really good. It's really fantastic. Like I said, the fight scenes don't feel as structured as they previously have been, but the last page of them just lying all bloody, it's a white background with just the Deathstroke title on it. Very well done. I do enjoy the art of Bennett very much. So, no, I do enjoy the issue. On the whole, I don't think this is maybe as entertaining as previous issues, and it definitely doesn't do as much to move things forward, but it is a necessary and solid issue on its own right. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7.5. It's doing a good job. I don't feel like anything was really left by the wayside. The only thing that I could possibly critique against it is the fact that the parents have a kill switch built in, and Grant didn't think of that. It seems a little bit iffy, but at the same time, Grant has always been, at least the way Deathstroke portrays him, is a little bit lesser caliber, a little bit less prepared. So, yeah, I think it actually does more to characterize it that it is able to be stopped just by an old couple with a remote control. So, yeah, no, I'm in on Deathstroke, and I'm really liking where it goes. Grifter, number 7, written by Nathan Edmondson, art by Scott Clark. We left off last issue with a giant Daemonite ship crashing, Grifter's in the Himalayas, and he hears some voice saying, "Come to me, help me, find me." That's it. This issue picks up immediately afterwards. He's snowmobiling his way through, following this voice, seeing what it could possibly be, and he comes across this flaming piece of debris that I think he's saying came from the Daemonite ship, but at the same point, if I'm remembering correctly from other comics, this one did not feed into me. I believe this came from the Stormwatch ship at the end of the last Stormwatch arc. Number 5, I believe. Maybe 6. Don't hold me on that. Anyway, the reason I think that is because as he approaches the ship and he hears it saying, it's like, oh, he has escaped, we need protection, Midnighter shows up from Stormwatch, and he's like, hey, who are you here? Oh, hey, I recognize you. You're the Grifter. You're the most wanted man on Earth. And he's like, yeah, cool, great. So here's the thing. Can you hear that voice? And he's like, no, I can't hear any voice. I think you might be a little bit loony. But you've stumbled onto a secret that I can't let you walk away with. And he's like, well, it's time for an extended fight scene. And they do. And basically the entire time, Midnighter, he has the upper hand on Grifter, but he's just like, hey, how did you find this place? Like, for real. Like, that's mainly the thing I want to know here, in case there's like some other security breach I need to be aware of. How did you find this place? And Grifter occasionally gets the upper hand on him, but for the most part, Midnighter's able to counteract his moves. And as he's doing this whole fight, he's hearing this piece of debris talk, and it's saying, this is an encrypted message. If you can hear this message, danger, ready to transmit memory by way of touch in 12 seconds. So the fight continues on, and as Midnighter has Grifter on the rocks, he reaches out and touches the ship, and then it transfers memories over to Grifter. And Midnighter's immediately like, what the hell was that? And he's like, you're part of Stormwatch, a secret society meant to protect Earth. He's like, okay, how do you know about my job? And he's like, you understand, you knew about the Daemonites. You knew they were a thing. And yet you proceeded to do nothing. And my brother died because of it. How dare you, sir? But then we cut over to, his brother's fine. His brother's in the hospital. And he's talking to a general. And the general's like, your brother's been out there causing havoc. And he's like, don't worry, sir. I'll put a bullet in him. So his brother's fine, and I went back and checked. Technically, there was no body, but a helicopter crashed on him, so it was reasonable to assume. So Grifter's trying to make somewhat of a run for it. Because they're in the Himalayas, there's ice sheets and stuff like that. He manages to cause a big crack in one of them, and then he tries to scale up this mountain, but Midnighter just straight up knocks Grifter off of the rope down into the crack of the ice sheet, and he's like, all right, he's probably dead, but just to make sure. And he collapses this like ice wall down into the ravine so that Grifter is definitely super dead. And he walks over to the debris and he's talking to Stormwatch HQ. He's like, hey, yeah, ran into some headache. Don't worry. He's like dead. I'm taking care of it. But I'm going to blow up the debris now so that it can't fall in the wrong hands. And he just sets essentially like a nuke on it. Like just this huge explosion to deal with it. And he's like, all right, send me back to Stormwatch. And so he goes back through, and we see that Grifter actually did survive. And he sees that the ship is gone, and he doesn't know what's this all about, how this is happening. But regardless, he realizes that the only way he can get close enough to the Daemonites to stop them is to convince the world that he is a villain. So that's his new con. And then we get one page of epilogue here of nearby. The thing that actually came out from the ship is talking, saying how this Earth is protected by so many strong beings, including the Kryptonian, but they will all be useless and defenseless against me, Hellspawn. I said Hellspawn. I don't care about Hellspawn. He looks dumb. So I think, if I remember correctly, that was teased at the end of the last Superman issue, so I think it's going to probably pick up over there. What happened to Sophia? In the last issue, she was ride or die with Grifter, and now she's just gone, and they never left the Himalayas, so is she dead or something? Like, what happened to her? Ignoring that, it's a fine issue. It felt like one of those ones where it's like, hey, can you cross over with other series because you're not selling as hot, and maybe if people see Midnighter on the cover, they'll be like, oh, cool, that's a character I recognize. But it's like, that's the third time, I think, in this series that it's done that. And I really don't think they have any faith in this particular series. Either that, or the reverse is true, and they're trying to pimp out all the other series through Grifter, and Grifter was actually one of their higher sellers. I believe that even less. But regardless of what happens, it just felt like sort of thing where this story didn't need to happen the way it did. Like, we didn't need to have Midnighter show up. Everything that happened could have just happened without that whole thing. I suppose it's a bit of a good tie-in in terms of they did actually reference the events of this in Stormwatch number 7, so I guess it's fine, but I don't know. It just feels unnecessary. It just feels like crossovers for the sake of crossovers, not because there's actually a reason to do it. So overall, art is fine. Discounting a couple of weird angles from Midnighter, like, it doesn't feel like the guy has to obey any sort of gravity or anything like that. Like, he's able to just go in a straight line zoom whenever he jumps. So a couple weird things there. But besides that, overall, I'm going to give this one a 6. It's fine. In concept, execution, I wish would have performed a little better, but what are you going to do? Suicide Squad number 7, written by Adam Glass, art by Clayton Henry and Ig Guara. We left off last issue with the first part of the hunt for Harley Quinn, where Harley gets captured by the GCPD because she wants to get in order to get to the Joker's face, and now the Suicide Squad has to break her out. So this issue picks up with them already having their plan in motion. King Shark is being disguised via holograms of Lime and Light, the two newbies, to look like Clayface so that they can have some plausible deniability, and it's just rampaging right outside the GCPD. Meanwhile, inside, Savant and Deathshot, that's the one, are making their way through the police. I'm pretty sure they're not lethal, but it's kind of hard to tell. And they just start splitting up because, you know, Harley could be anywhere in here, but Savant makes the point. He's like, no, there's only one place she is. She's wherever the face is. So we just got to find that. Also, apparently, Waller's taking this pretty personally because this is the first time someone's actually managed to go AWOL on the Suicide Squad. But we get a flashback to Harleen Quinzel after a bunch of interviews with the Joker, and her boss is chewing her out like, you have a crush on the Joker? Are you insane? And she's like, no, I don't have a crush on him. I just think he's interesting. But in the process of her boss freaking out on her, she sees her own research notes on the boss's desk with, like, evidence that they were being collated for publication. And apparently the boss was going to use Harley's research to make her own book and get rich. And the boss tries to justify it for a second, but Harley just backhands her and then goes at her with a broken shard of glass. Security guard comes in, hears all the commotion, like, what happened? Is there one of those crazies loose in here? And then Harley theoretically kills them both. Doesn't actually show it. But then we get to Joker, who's in a cell. Harley comes in with a bloodied up gun, being like, hey, something happened, and we're going to go now. And they leave arm in arm, and Joker in blood has written on the glass of the cell, gone fishing. So then we get back to Harley versus Savant as he's walking through some of the detention holding cells underneath the GCPD. Harley comes at him with the hammer. He manages to dodge and gets in some good shots, but Harley baits him into one of the cells where he steps on a pressure mine. And if he takes his weight off of the mine, it will explode. So he's forced to just sit there in one of the cells while Harley does her thing. Meanwhile, we cut back outside to Lime, Light, and King Shark. Lime and Light are having trouble keeping the hologram going. So King Shark makes his way down into the sewer so that they can't see that it is actually him there. But as he gets out of the way of Lime and Light, Lime is hit by a bullet and just grazed, but she's injured. And she tells Light to leave and she'll take care of herself. And as she's being arrested by the cops, she's like, okay, I'll tell you everything you need to know. I'm part of a team. They treat us like animals, inject bombs into our necks. We're called Task Force S, and we're all employed by Amanda. And then Waller blows up her head. And Light does not take that particularly well. So then we cut over to Deadshot. He's going down a dark hallway. Turns on his infrared, which Harley takes advantage of by then lighting up 2 road flares, which blind him temporarily and allow Harley to get the upper hand. She knocks him out. And we cut one more time back to Harley's past, where they are at Ace Chemicals, and Joker's giving her the tour and being like, hey, by the way, this is where I was born, and we're here to celebrate your birthday. And she's like, it's not my birthday. And she's like, no. Today will be your birthday from now on. And he tosses her over into the acid bath that he fell into. And as he drains it and lets her out, we see that she's become bleached skin, black and red hair, the Harley that we all know and tolerate. And she plants a big old kiss on the Joker saying, come here, puddin'. So there's the origin of Harley Quinn. So we cut back to Deadshot. He's tied up in a chair. Harley steps up saying that we need to talk. And as he's like, all right, untie me. And I say, no, Deadshot, not you. And she pulls out Joker's face, puts it onto Deadshot, and says, now we're going to talk. And Deadshot's like, oh, you've actually lost it. Okay, cool. So she asked, like, now, why did you leave me, Mr. J? And Deadshot's like, I guess I got to play along here. I didn't quit us, you did. And she's like, no, I loved you. And he's like, yeah? So then why are Batgirl and Batman and Robin still alive? You're a stupid girl. Why didn't you do what I made you for? And she plants a sloppy one on Deadshot wearing Joker's face. She's like, I knew you'd be back, Mr. J. Now we can be together for... And then she gets shot. Deadshot used the distraction to get a gun he was hiding, shoots Harley in the stomach, and she collapses in a pool of her own blood on the cell. And that's it. That's the arc. That's where it ends. I like it. I think it's important to have the Harley Quinn origin here, especially with how, just from a meta sense, how much they're going to be leaning into Harley's everything in a little bit. So having it here where she's pretty much being introduced to the New 52 exclusively, I think it's necessary to be here. Giving her own arc, same deal. She's a more... If they're already have the plans to do big things with her, I think now's a good time to do that. That being said, I don't really know what this arc accomplished. If we do more with the Lime and Light stuff, that could be interesting, especially because they were made in Green Arrow, and I didn't care for them at all. So to do something with them here would actually be impressive. I feel like the primary point of this arc was just to give Harley Quinn some focus and give her some character development, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. That being said, I wonder if we're actually going to stick with any sort of consequences from this, rather than just, oh yeah, Harley got patched up and everyone else made it out pretty much alive. If that happens, I won't be too upset, but I will be a little bit disappointed. Anyway, for this particular issue, art's fine. I like the way that Harley is just literally having a mental breakdown, even for her crazy self. So, yeah, it's good. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6.5. Again, my only main critique is the fact of, you know what? No, I'll bump it up to a 7. It's good. It's a good issue. I don't really have any major critiques outside of how they might handle it moving forward, but I can't critique this issue for that. So I'll give it a 7. And I am looking forward to seeing what the next trade brings. Legion Lost number 7, written by Tom DeFalco, art by Pete Woods. We left off last issue with Martian Manhunter basically saying, hey, you guys are stuck here. There's no time travel back to your time. So accept that. And also they got the other two team members back of Gates and Chameleon Girl, I think. So this issue opens up with a girl who's seemingly being tortured in some sort of medical way with like syringes and stuff. She's unable to speak, unable to do whatever, but she can psychically scream out. I'll get to that plot at the end. It's kind of detached from the rest. But the rest of the plot continues with New York City. The entire team teleports in front of this street thief named Osman bin Afadi, who, you know, he's seen some stuff out on these streets. And the team doesn't see that he's seen them. So they immediately change into a projection of 2012 fashion, which they specifically referenced the Kardashians. Okay, so Timberwolf has the suspicion that somebody saw them, but he's not acting on it as of now. They all make their way to a hotel and immediately drop the costumes, which makes me wonder why we did that at all, but regardless. It basically boils down to a 3-page long discussion of like, okay, if we're stuck here, what should we be doing? First off, should we keep on taking advantage of people? Because like we keep on just mentally pushing them to give us free stuff so that we can survive. But we also don't have any money to do anything with. Like we don't have hard currency. And they make the point of like, oh, should we get jobs? Is that what we should be doing here? And Chameleon Girl, she does a short little transformation for the sake of a joke, but apparently transforming actually like hurts her now. So that's a thing. Additionally, they lost Alistair, and they like didn't stop the hypertaxis virus from getting out. So what should be their goal right now? And Tyrock pretty much is like, all right, look, we got to stay to the mission. We got to find Alistair. We got to do that. And at this exact moment, Tellus gets a psychic blast from that girl from the first page. And Tyrock's like, no, I just said the mission. We need to stay focused on that. And everyone's just like, maybe we should just be general superheroes if we're just going to be here. Like, the mission's, like, we missed it. We screwed it up. It's done. Let's just help people where we can help them. And Wildfire kind of tries to step up to be team leader, but, you know, it's getting a bit tense. At this point, Timberwolf steps out and realizes that they were seen by, I can't even remember this guy's name anymore. They'd never say it again. Osman. And he's basically just like, hey, so here's the deal. Yes, I saw you guys, and of course you're not from around here, but that's cool. That's fine. I don't care about that. If you guys need to know the streets, though, I'm your man. And Timberwolf's like, what do you mean? He's like, see that building over there? It's got cash because they sell drugs and they're bad people. And he's like, cool. I need some cash. So Timberwolf busts in and starts just wrecking shop in this pharmaceutical, well, not actually pharmaceutical, but in this drug ring place. And as he does so, he walks out with this giant bag of money and surprises Osmond. And Osmond's like, oh, well, I'll take my slice. And it's like, slice? Since when do sidekicks get sliced? And he's like, I'm not a sidekick. I'm a consultant. So, yeah, they just, a little maybe friendship brewing. I don't know. So then we go to, I guess I'll just say real quick, there's a couple more short little arguments about like what they should be doing. But for the most part, everyone comes to the agreement of like, okay, we'll do what we need to right now just to be able to get by. But the primary thing in this back half is Tellus makes the psychic connection with this girl that's screaming out in like fear and pain. And they have Dawnstar. I'm still trying to remember all their names. Dawnstar fly over to the place where the psychic blast came out from. And they think she's being like tortured and being held by people with like heavy arms and security and stuff. But as it turns out, she's actually just a comatose girl who is being treated in a hospital. And she's just freaking out because of that. So there's nothing they can really do. But Tellus stays inside of her mind and shows her like beautiful imagery and lets her live out in a happy landscape instead of the terrifying one she had. And she explains that the whole reason she's in a coma is because she was texting and driving and she crashed into a tree and 2 of her friends died. She managed to get out with just a coma, but she wonders why she's being punished or she knows she's being punished for this because of her action. She's like, no, you're not being punished. Bad things just happen to people sometime. But over the course of it, she starts to drift away a little bit. We see that her parents are basically pulling her off of flight support as Tellus is inside her mind. And one of the last things she says is like, hey, thank you for this. Thank you so much for showing me these things. I'm not afraid to go now. But you clearly have some secret that you're not telling your friends. And if so, you should, because you never know when you might lose them and if you might blame yourself because of it. And so she passes away and everyone's like, hey, do you know where Timberwolf is? Tell us. And Tellus is just, he's shook. He's like in grief. He's like, oh God, what did I just go through? So, yeah, that happened. But then we get one panel at the very end here of a group of people, and I believe Rose Wilson from Superboy, and it says, new threats and thrills. Join us as we ramp up for The Culling, a major crossover event that stars the Legion Lost Teen Titans and Superboy. So that's going to happen soon. I think that starts on issue 8, maybe 9. I don't know. I'll double check. not looking forward to it. So I'm good with this. I like how this is. It's setting up, okay, the mission screwed up. What do we do now? How is our next steps going on? It's setting up the new status quo. Meanwhile, it told an actually very touching story with Tellus and that psychic link to the girl. The only thing I could do without is the whole Timberwolf thing, but that tied into like how are we supposed to survive out in the world today. And he stole money from drug dealers, so it's like, yeah, it's a morally gray area, but it's still more morally white than morally black. So I like it. It's decent for now. And I am finally getting character names, so that's something. But yeah, I know they had to go through a thing where they tried to complete the mission before they got back to the what do we do now story. But I feel like this is where I'm actually going to start caring about it. Because that whole hyper Texas virus thing, I didn't care about at all. Maybe that's just me, but it seemed completely above my head in terms of what are we even talking about here. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 6.5. And most of that comes down to I really do like the designs and layouts of the Tellus stuff and the story that it told there, as well as the promise of what's coming up next. Demon Knights number 7, written by Paul Cornell, art by Diogenes Nevis. We left off last issue with basically the final stand. The Horde was breaking through the walls and they all had to fight. And horse, woman, lady, person made her way past the dragons and is trying to approach the main city of Alba, whatever. This issue picks up literally in hell, where Jason Blood is being attacked by a whole bunch of demons, but he makes his way over to Father Theod, the priest that Etrigan killed like 2 issues ago. And he's like, why am I here in hell? And he's like, because the demon killed you. Sorry, but now you're kind of important to Xanadu's plan. So come over here. So then we see the fight in Little Spring, and it's not going great. They're holding their own, but just barely. We cut over to Vandal Savage, who sees that the Horde has made their way into the village, but then as he looks over, he's like, oh, look, there's the supply chain for the Horde that is now left completely unguarded because of my making a place where people can attack the village. So he just runs towards the Horde with a couple of his more dedicated lackeys. Then we go to the Questing Queen's mobile palace, and she sees that the entire supply chain has been burned and attacked by Vandal Savage. And she's like, okay, well, because of that, the Horde is stopping the attack on the village and going to, like, the supply chain to attack Savage. And, like, everything's kind of falling to crap because also that horse lady made it there and they'll be there. The cavalry will arrive within the hour. Oh, geez, this isn't going well. And she tells Mordru to take a decade of her life in order to refuel his magic. So, supposedly he does. Meanwhile, we see Etrigan transforms back into Jason Blood, and he arrives with the tears of an innocent who was sent to hell. So, this Xanadu drinks, and then immediately becomes her young self again, super powerful, because why not? Savage is making his way across the line between the supply line and the village, and they're being bombarded by arrows and fire. All of his lackeys end up dying, but he just uses their corpses as like shields to catch all the arrows for him. And then we cut to Albacerum, where Horsewoman arrives, and she warns them, hey, the Horde is coming, the Horde is coming, get your cavalry, let's go. And back in the village, the last of, I'm blanking on his name, but that one guy who made the war engines, Al-Jabir, all of his war engines are burning, and he's like, all right, well, time to fight with my sword then. And Etrigan's spewing fire over everybody. Meanwhile, Shining Knight is going to fight the Horde, and the Horde's like, we're not fighting a girl. And he's like, I'm not a girl. And then the Questing Queen steps up and is just like, all right, well, no matter what, you're going to be fighting me because this is now a personal thing. And Shining Knight's like, awesome. Meanwhile, Xanadu's fighting against Mordru, who's had his powers rebounded up to like 100, and he claims to be the most powerful sorcerer of this like century. And then we cut back to Demon and Al-Jabir, Etrigan and Al-Jabir, And Vandal Savage comes in to help save them, and Altimir's like, how dare you, Vandal, think you can pretend to come back to our side? He's like, what do you mean pretend? Everything I did was for our side. I managed to destroy their supply line and mess everything up. And Demon's like, or Etrigan's like, yeah, all right, that makes sense. I'm down with it. Cool. So they look around and they realize this fight has grown so far beyond their own capabilities because Mordru and Xanadu are literally having just a magic fight. They're like summoning stuff at each other. And Shining Knight and Questing Queen are locked in a heated dual sword fight because Questing Queen wants to get the Holy Grail, which I guess killing Shining Knight would reveal the location of or something. I don't know. But Questing Queen throws a knife into Shining Knight's shoulder, and Mordru gets the upper hand on Xanadu for a second, and everyone's just, losing ground. It's the last little how are they going to get out of this one as the village burns. But as they do so, Exaristo stands up and is just like, I don't care whether or not I'm accepted. I am an Amazon, and I will fight until my dying breath. And so she gets a second win, attacks all those people, and Mordru tells the queen before Shining Knight is killed, like, hey, the cavalry is coming in, and they just beat our dragons, so yeah, we might want to get going because their magic is strong and could actually win this battle. So they have to make a retreat. And Horsewoman comes in with the entire magic cavalry from Albacerum, and the horde retreats. And meanwhile, there's fire, there's death, there's destruction, and the leader of the cavalry is like, you must be the Demonites. Be glad, for we have won this day. As just corpses litter the field. And that's where it ends. I think it was a solid wrap-up. Again, it was more just one big fight. I don't know. It doesn't feel like the end of the arc. It's the end of the trade, but it doesn't feel like the end of the arc. So I feel like whatever we do next issue is actually going to set up what the actual story of the Demon Knights will be. Like, this issue was just getting them together. Next issue will determine, okay, here is the marching order. How do these people work together? What are they going to do as a team? And I'm more interested in that than I am this particular issue. This one was fine, but even in the end, they didn't win. Like, they just happened to hold out long enough for the cavalry, which I guess was the point the entire time, but it was still, they were pretty much about to lose if it didn't happen right then, which is good suspense, but doesn't fill me with much confidence for the team. So, yeah, no, I'm going to give this one a 7, and a lot of that is art and humor. I really do like the way that it tells the story and just the little bits it has thrown throughout. So, no, well written, well done. Demon Knights is definitely worth a read. Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E. number 7, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Alberto Ponticelli. We left off last issue with the Humanids, I believe they were called, basically staging a revolt because of Brother Eye breaking in and freeing the original creature commandos on Nina and Lady Frankenstein. This issue picks up exactly where it's left off. Lady Frankenstein is being held hostage by a big goop monster, and Nina is forced to hold a gun to him. She can't bring herself to pull the trigger, though, so she is knocked out by the creature commandos. Meanwhile, Father Time, Ray Palmer, and the one scientist dude are like, well, this is bad. Where's Frankenstein? He's like, he's getting back from Vietnam. Also, has anyone noticed that there are no humanids around anywhere? So Frankenstein gets back, and as he tries to get into the door of the building, it's not opening. So he just kicks it in, screaming, I hate technology. And as soon as he gets in, he's surrounded by humanids, all poised with guns. So then we get the explanation from the people like, it was Brother Eye, he caused this virus, and blah, 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 blah. And one of the humanids shows up and was just like, the revolution has begun. All of you flesh beings have 1 hour to flee. This city belongs to humanids now. And Father Time's like, you are literally going to die in 24 hours. Why in the world would we ever give it up to you? And he's like, the Brother Eye has given us new life. Anything in our hive mind will continue on. We are no longer disposable. We are eternal. And he's like, all right, well, we don't negotiate with terrorists, so let's see how this goes. So Father Time calls Frankenstein, just be like, hey, so they're holding us hostage, and I'm in a bad mood, so take all these humans out with extreme prejudice. And he's like, cool. And vampire, werewolf, Khalid, and Frankenstein all start slashing off heads. Frankenstein tells Khalid that they're going to make their way down to go after whatever escaped, because the Father Time also told him about the creature commandos. Also told him, hey, go down, stop whatever escaped, help your wife out. Meanwhile, Velcoro and Griffith, vampire and werewolf, they're going to stay up here, and they're going to find the place that the humanids are manufactured and make sure no new ones get made, so that way they can actually stop the production. So Nina starts coming to, and the creature commandos are like, oh, hey, Mom, you locked us away, and you put us in a prison. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to, but I can help you, we can figure something out. And she's like, no, it's too late for that. But then Lady Frankenstein, who I guess they just kind of forgot about, starts blasting through the goop monster one, and is like, all right, who's next? Meanwhile, Velcoro and Griffith make their way to a secret armory room that's full of all the experimental tech that, like, they shouldn't be able to get into, but Velcoro won the entrance code off of a science nerd in a poker game last night. So they get in and they pick up things like a gun that shoots mini buzzsaws, an exploding sword, and a gun that they don't know what it does, but it sure sounds cool. And then they're ready to go attack. Meanwhile, we see the humanids who have surrounded Father Time and Ray Palmer. The scientist is cowering away, but Father Time and Ray Palmer start fighting back, and Ray does his whole shrinking down thing and then scaling back up because, of course, he is the Atom. And Father Time's like, hey, should we get you in a costume? And Ray Palmer's like, nah, that's not my style. So we see Velcoro and Griffith taking care of the production line. They're all good and done for. Frankenstein and Khalid are making their way down to the creature commandos, but also see that pretty much Lady Frankenstein has got it all covered. That, no big deal. But the Invisible Man, I guess, was one of them, and he steals Frankenstein's sword and cuts off Khalid's head, Khalees. I've been calling him Khalid. Anyway, Khalees's head. And immediately Frankenstein, gets his hands around that guy's neck and then just starts strangling him. Nina realizes Khalees is still alive. And it's like, oh, we have to get him help immediately. And they're like, okay, yeah, we could, but here's the thing. I need you in the teleport room now. And as they arrive, one of the interns or whatever who was running the teleport room apparently let out one more member of the creature commandos who, or at least he was the fifth prisoner in there. And he's even more dangerous, and there's no records kept on him because he's so scary strong. And what was it? It was the son of Frankenstein and Lady Frankenstein. Dun, dun, dun. All right. It's good. It's a solid follow-up to the last issue. I feel like we didn't quite get as much mileage out of the Creature Commandos as I would have hoped, but, it was decent enough on its own to set up this next bit. Same thing with the Humanid plot. It just feels like, okay, well, that happened, and now we're just kind of done with it. I don't know. I feel like it set up some big ideas in the last issue, and then it just kind of, okay, that's fine, but we're done now with them. And now we're going with this Son of Frankenstein thing, which may be a large plot, maybe a tiny one, I don't know. But the fact that that's what wrapped up the issue is just a 2-issue thing of revolution of the Humanids, and then it just died as quickly. It feels like wasted potential. I feel like there was something more that could have been done there. But regardless, that's a story that Geoff wanted to tell, and it's good. It's a fine enough story. I just wish it would have done more. So overall, A, because of the humor, B, the art style I do mostly enjoy. There's a couple weirdnesses every once in a while, but with a monster gang, it's not too bad. But with all that combined, I would give this one a 7. I think it's just very well done. I do think it's missing a lot of potential that it had from the arc, but I can't really blame it that much if that's what Jeff Lemire wanted to do. So 7 for this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Son of Frankenstein. Resurrection Man number 7, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, art by Fernando Dagnino. We left off last issue with an Arkham breakout, and Mitch now has fire powers. Cool. So this issue picks up, he is now staying in Metropolis, and he is staying in a very futuristic city, what appears to be a very old-style hotel. And the narration actually makes a point of how that kind of building is being phased out for the city of tomorrow. But he hears that there is some police outside, and they have the location surrounded. And Mitch immediately shoots up, and he's like, son of a bitch, how did they find me? Oh, God, I got to get out of here. So he throws on some clothes and, has his firepower ready to go. But as he makes his way out to the hallway, he realizes, oh, wait a minute. They're not here for me. They're here for something completely different. Huh, all right. So he depowers a little bit and starts making his way down the stairs. And as he does so, the SWAT that has been built up outside of one of the apartments, or rooms, I should say, explodes. And the SWAT is now stuck in a firefight with a man named Mr. Untouchable, who I guess was running a meth lab in this building. Okay. And as he so aptly points out, the reason that he's Mr. Untouchable is because he has a force field device on that is very, very, very similar to the force field device we saw from, I believe, the last issue, or maybe the issue before. Yeah, it was the issue before, of Mitch back in his days before Resurrection Man. So nothing can get him, and he's totally safe to go around punching people. And Resurrection Man, he sees that, and he's like, wait a minute. I don't remember anything, but I kind of remember that. Huh? Oh, geez. Yeah, no, I remember that now. I was a total dickbag back then. Why did anyone like me? Anyway, that must be the whole reason I'm here. So the meth lab catches on fire and starts exploding out. The building starts collapsing in on itself, and everyone's like, oh no, the stairs are on fire. How are we supposed to get through? And Mitch steps forward, and he's like, everyone stand back. And he uses his fire powers to stop the fire and let everyone out. And as he gets down to the ground, one of the police officers is like, hey, you're that guy who escaped from Arkham. Freeze, I got you. And Mitch is like, I can go and help. I control fire stuff. Just let me go help. He's like, nah, you're not going anywhere, you lunatic. Then an explosion happens. Everyone gets distracted, and Mitch uses the chaos to get back inside. And as he does, he comes up to Mr. Untouchable, and Mitch is like, hey, hi. So you killed a lot of people, and that's enough. So he just starts blasting the guy around. But of course he's untouchable, so nothing's able to get to him. And then Mitch realizes hey, I bet that force field still has oxygen in it though. And he uses his pyrokinesis to light the oxygen inside of the force field on fire. But then he catches himself and he's like, holy crap, I was just about to set a man on fire. Is that the type of person I am? Oh, geez, that's not good. And as he's distracted with this moral quandary, Mr. Untouchable stands up. He's like, you're weird. And then just shoots him half a dozen times through the chest. And as he stands over the body, of course, Mitch starts doing his regeneration thing and resurrecting. And now his new power is actually force field based. It's actually psychokinesis. He's able to make constructs with just his mind. And so he uses it to make a big old fist that punches Mr. Untouchable. And he's like, oh, yes, now I'm able to use my power to get inside of your suit and turn it off from the inside, which he does. And as Mr. Untouchable is basically just pleading for his life, he's like, look, you got to let me live. I set this whole building to blow. We don't have much time. And we see the explosion go off, and Mitch uses his powers of psychokinesis to control the blast and aim it upwards. And while the building is pretty much lost, it's totally gone, and therefore is demolished soon afterwards. Mr. Untouchable was alive, unscathed. Mitch saved him, and he was taken into protection. And then we see Mitch just basically reminiscing I nearly killed that guy, so I need to figure out who I am and what's drawing this to me. We're seemingly, maybe he forgot about everything in the last 6 issues before Arkham. I don't know, hard to tell. Regardless, he's like, I got to find out who the real me is. That dream of the ruthless man in Iraq. Time to go to the library, and that's where we leave off of him, I guess, going to the library. While I don't think this issue is as strong as those first 5 were, the 6th issue was definitely the turning point of, okay, now we're doing something, because he pretty much just disappeared. All the angels, the body doubles, everything like that just he left that plot behind and he's going to do something else right now. I hope that stuff comes back because I was really interested in it, but if we have to deal a little bit outside of that, I'm okay with it. If it's him discovering his past, more or less. But yeah, I don't know. I was super interested in the first arc, and now that we just transitioned to this so quickly, it just kind of rubs me the other way. So it's not bad. It's not a bad arc. I just wish that we had continued on the other one. So this particular issue, I would just give like a 6.5 sounds too low, but 7 sounds too high. So I am going to go 6.5 on it just because it's so standalone. It's so just its own thing. I didn't really need the moral quandary of like, who am I? What kind of person would kill someone like that? Because like a lot of superheroes do that stuff. Like a lot of people just set people, like they have fire powers and they use them. So it's kind of weird that this is the one guy who's just like, oh, wait a minute, that hurts people. Fire hurts people. So, yeah, I don't know. 6.5. It's got something to say. I just hope that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. My Greatest Adventure number 6, the end of 3 stories, all combined into one issue. So let's start off with Robot Man, part 6, written by Matt Kindt, art by Scott Collins. We pick up inside of this bunker that is run by Dr. Turing, Mr. Turing, whatever it is. It's being attacked by some robot monkeys. Robot Man blasts out of the facility, burns up the monkeys in re-entry, and then just basically goes back in. And what's-her-face, Maddie, says, oh, Cliff, don't hurt him. I called Unreason, and they're here with a cleanup crew to help the island. But then Turing immediately just starts saying, like, yeah, so here's the thing. I'm the one who caused your car to crash because I wanted to see if the nanobots would do what they were going to do. I ruined your life. And basically I was trying to make this island be something I could experiment on, but because they're all mutated animals, I needed the real deal to come. So that's why I have you show up now. And Robot Man's, like, trying to kill him because how dare he ruin his life for something so stupid. But, of course, the Asimov's law of robotics would not allow him to harm another being. So Unreason, which I guess is just another one of those shady organizations, shows up, starts cleaning up the island, takes care of Turing, and Robot Man and Maddie fly off. And Robot Man reminisces on how he first met Maddie, and she showed compassion to him when he was still just figuring out who he was. And in the moment when Unreason was basically going to keep him around and run tests on him for the rest of his life, Maddie stepped in and let him live life on his own. So they arrive back at their home, which I think is just the Space Needle, but they arrive and basically Robot Man is like, hey, look, this wasn't your fault. You have no reason to feel guilty over me anymore. You can leave whenever you want. And it just shows another page or so of basically him using all of his robot sensors, whether he wants to or not, to realize that Maddie took that hard and she's upset and she's sad that, like, she's caused pain to Robot Man or something. But Robot Man, of course, for his own law of robotics, he has brought harm to another person, so he feels bad. And then there's a giant sea monster off of the seaboard attacking an oil rig, and Robot Man swoops in to stop it because he's like, well, I'm going to try my damned hardest to put the man back in Robot Man. Da-da-da. Honestly, this read really, really poorly issue to issue. It might read well all at one go, but it just didn't have enough connecting threads to really make it good on its own. So overall, I wouldn't give it more than maybe a 6, 5.5, 6. So next up we got Garbage Man, story and art by Aaron Lopresti. And basically it is Garbage Man and the girl, whatever her name is, they're going to put their plan into motion in order to get the dirt on Titan Industry. And basically the dude shows up. He has security. She's like, I told you to show up alone. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, give me the file. And she's like, nope, do the plan now. And the plan is basically Garbage Man just runs out and grabs him. So, yeah, there's a brief fight scene of him getting rid of the security, but then he gets his hands on the guy and he's just like, I'm that guy you thought you killed. And he's like, oh my God, that's impossible. But of course, we can save you. We can get things fixed. I still have my notes. And then he's shot in the head by a sniper. And Garbage Man's like, no. damn you. And then Batman shows up and he's like, hey, what's going on over here? He's like, I didn't kill this guy. It was a sniper. He's like, yeah, all right. Anyway, here's the thing. I did some more analysis on your garbage man form, and it turns out you don't have a human body under that. You are literally all garbage, and you just have consciousness. So there's nothing to turn back into. You're stuck like this. And he's like, oh, man, that sucks. Regardless, we can still get revenge on the company who did this and the guy in charge of the whole thing. So Batman and Garbage Man go and intimidate the guy. I can't even remember his name. The architect behind it all. Yeah, really, I have no clue what this guy's name is. But anyway, he's the one in charge of everything in Titan and the one who's making all the calls. And then it's basically say, like, here's the thing. We're going to put you through the justice system, and you're going to face what you did for killing Richard Morse. And I'm going to make sure that you're brought to justice. And then they just walk out, and the dude sees the file that they have on him, pulls out a gun from his drawer, and blows his brains out. And then we get one more page of Garbage Man talking to that sewer priest guy. And he's like, is that justice, priest? Is this really what it was all for? And he's like, you ever hear the story of Job? Job lost everything because of God making a bet with Satan, but then God gave it back to him twofold. Perhaps this just isn't the end of your story, Garbage Man. End of story of Garbage Man. I like that one a lot more. I think it's very well done in terms of the issue to issue, but it still does just have a thing of, oh, maybe we should have gotten to this main plot a little bit sooner so that we didn't have to just rush it so quickly at the end. So overall, I give that a 6.5. It's okay. And the last thing is Tanga, written and art by Kevin McGuire, and she's facing off against the big head guy who I literally don't think is named in this entire issue, but regardless, the big head guy reveals that the entire plan was that the blue energy source isn't an energy source. It is a drug, and he's fooling this entire planet into believing that's an energy source, so that way they would put their faith in S.H.A.D.E, who he installed, and S.H.A.D.E would go after these monsters that are teleporting in, but it turns out the big head is the one who's teleporting them in anyway. So it was really just all on him to like fabricate a need for S.H.A.D.E and then have the people praise him for succeeding. And then Tanga showed up and ruined it all because she's a girl, and S.H.A.D.E was far too horny. So, yeah. And in the end, the big head just wants to know, who are you, Tanga? What are you? And Tanga is just so pissed off by the fact that this has all been just one big ruse. She literally nuclear explodes, kills everything around her, and she's like, maybe I'm a monster, maybe I'm a hero, I don't know, but I'm Tanga. And then she flies off back to the people who were helping her, and they're like, well, I mean, the people still believe you're evil, and there's not much we can do to change it. And she's like, well, what if you prove to them that the blue ore isn't a power source and it's a drug instead? And he's like, yes, we could use my new science equipment that's coming in. I had a ship that is supposed to be flying by any time now. And she's like, oh, yeah, I blew up that ship earlier. I'm sorry, it was a whole thing. And he's like, you blew up that was all of my savings. That was all my stuff. And she's like, I'm sorry, I'll pay you back. And she just stands there as everyone else walks away, staring at her disapprovingly. And she flies off. The entire townspeople are like, oh, no, the demon, run. And she's like, man, screw this planet. So she flies off into space, and she's like, well, 3 days on a planet, and I'm already despised. That's a new record. Guess I'll go this way. And then she flies off into the void, seeing what will happen next. I still don't understand what in the hell a Tanga is. Like, I guess that's the point, is that Tanga is just Tanga. But, like, so baffled by that series as a whole. At least I got some explanation in the end. So overall, I'll give that a 6, with the biggest flaw just being they were so hesitant to put out any exposition throughout the entire series. This issue is nothing but text balloons, like the whole way through. Fine, whatever. Overall, My Greatest Adventure, not the best anthology series. It definitely feels like none of these things deserve books, therefore we're throwing them here. Hope you like. And in that regard, I'm glad they're at least testing new things, but it definitely was not worth the price of admission for the most part. So yeah, My greatest adventure. Not a great adventure. The Ray number 4, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jamal Igle. It is the end of the miniseries, and last issue we left off with the Ray's girlfriend pulling a gun on the director, and this issue she shoots him just straight in the chest. And the Ray's like, oh, this isn't how this was supposed to go at all. I was supposed to be a superhero. And then we turn the page, and the girlfriend, again, I can't remember her name, but she's just like, what have I done? I've killed a man. And he's like, what have you done? You killed me. I'm supposed to be immortal. And then the giant robots start coming after her, but the Ray jumps in the middle. And he's like, I have multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe internal bleeding, but I'm gonna fight this fight. And he goes around, he fights the giant robots, and in his last stand, he makes a giant, the best I can describe is like laser grid that just dissolves the robots into nothing. And he walks up to the director, who is still dying, like this random ass gun killed him despite the fact he can warp reality. And some paramedics come over and it's like, oh, hey, we're gonna take care of you. And then they talk to us like, we have no idea how to take care of this guy. He's got some crazy shit going on. And the Ray steps up and he's like, hey, you can change all of this. You can just fix this. Why don't you just fix it? And he's like, you don't understand. This is how it has to be. The villain dies at the end and the hero gets the girl. He's like, I'm not going to get the girl. I have deep internal bleeding and you just killed her father last issue. There's no way this works out for me. And so basically he's just trying to convince the reality warping villain to make things better before he dies. And when he refuses to, because he's like, you wouldn't understand because you're not dying, the Ray conjures up some colored lights and stuff like that, and he plans on using hypnotherapy to basically hypnotize the director into going back and warping reality all the way back to the director's childhood so that he would have a better life, not turn to villainy, and not do that. And also he would fix everything else that has happened because of him. And as well as it's kind of implied that Lucian asks the director to allow him to redo that first night he met his girlfriend's parents. So then we get that chance. We see him going and meeting the girlfriend's parents again. And sorry, her name was Shanti. That was it. So we're going to meet Shanti's parents again. And he's just himself, and he brought some gifts, and he's just being his own likable self. And apparently it went well. And she's talking to Shanti afterwards, and he's just like, I still don't think your dad likes me. He's like, yes, but you made a good impression. He's like, I was thinking of disguising myself as this famous Indian star. And she's like, that would have been stupid. He's like, yeah, totally. So then they go to a movie premiere called Ray of Hope, where I think she is in the movie or like produced it or something. Hard to tell. Regardless, they watched the movie and apparently it was a fantastic thing. And we see that the director of the movie was Thaddeus Fillmore, the guy who was the villain, who now has turned his life around and has gotten numerous Oscars and everything's so great. And then Lucian's phone goes off. There's some superhero business he needs to take care of. Hostage situation in the skyrise. And as they're about to shoot the hostages and kill some people and use a RPG on a helicopter nearby, Ray swoops in, takes out all the bad guys, saves the hostages, and was just like, remember everybody, working late is not good. Go spend time with your family. But then the doors blow open and everyone's told to get down on the ground, and we see the FBI is busted in, and not only the FBI, some other guy who walks in and he's like, hey, good work, Ray. Here's the deal. I've got a team, and I want you to join it. Dude, you can make a real difference in the world. You thought you were the only superhero? You just joined a bigger world you didn't know about. It's just the scene from the end of Iron Man. It's just that. And he gets a card saying, I want you. And the Ray's like, well, let's see what happens here. And that's it. So I know what that ending leads up to because back when I first got these comics, I read ahead and realized what happened. So I'm not going to spoil that. But I do think that this is a weird-ass way to end the series of you having a reality-warping villain and you're just like, hey, you get shot by a random civilian with a normal gun. Like, what? That's how your reality-warping villain... What? I don't know. It just seemed weird to me. He was so intent on the 3-act structure of having the villain die that he let himself die because of it. It was an interesting take. I'm not sure if it's a good take, but an interesting take. In terms of this issue as a whole, kind of mediocre. I don't think it was really that satisfying of an end to just say, like, and it never actually really happened. But on the series as a whole, I enjoyed the Ray enough. I think he didn't really have an arc that much. It was more just, hey, here's him realizing not to be such a dick. Like, not to just use his powers to fix all of his problems, I guess. So, I don't know. It's okay. The series as a whole. This issue specifically, I would give maybe like a 5. Like, I don't know. It felt like it was a bit of a cop-out in the end after everything of setting it up. But it also was 4 issues, and there wasn't very much you really could have done with that. So, yeah, no. Ray was okay. And I'm looking forward to seeing what spins out of that final bit, or at least sharing it with you. So, yeah. The Ray was fine. The Shade, number 6, written by James Robinson, art by Javier Pulido. We left off last issue with a vampire that was kind of the child of S.H.A.D E named La Sangra having to take on a villain named the Inquisitor who's attacking Spain, and he's there because reasons. So this issue picks up. The Inquisitor is talking to his followers saying like, all right, you guys... You are not perfect in the eyes of God. You are still sinners, but your deaths will allow something bigger to happen. Your sacrifice is noble. Go now, my children. And he sends his followers out into the city. Meanwhile, we see a flashback to 1944 with Lysanger first fighting the Inquisitor and seemingly throwing him into a vat of molten metal. But he got better. And then we cut to today with, I think it's the inside of like a police something, and Lysanger and S.H.A.D E are there basically saying like, okay, so here's the thing. Inquisitor wants me to surrender myself, but he didn't actually give a location, so it's part of the game. We gotta find him, and then I have to surrender myself. Meanwhile, we see cutaways of the different followers of Inquisitor are all like prepping themselves for suicide. Like one of them's dousing themselves in gas, one has a gun to his head, one has a knife to his throat, and the last one is about to jump off a building. And as they're trying to figure out now where could the Inquisitor be, we get a new character popping in named Montpellier, who has some sort of snake costume going on, and he's brought in some dude who's dressed like a clown. Yep. And he's like, may I offer my assistance? And he considers himself to be a pretty good detective, but also a crime fighter or whatever. And basically, as soon as he offers himself up to try to find where Inquisitor is, they get word that these 4 guys have killed themselves. And Montpellier's like, are you sure it was 4, not 5? And he's like, yeah, no, it was 4. And then we see the sequence of them killing themselves. So then we go to the morgue, and they're investigating the bodies. And S.H.A.D E was questioning something that Lysanger said earlier about the Inquisitor and him being around being weird. Because apparently, during their fight in 1944, she like, in all prior fights, she got some blood off the guy, and it was him. It was always the same guy. But in 1944, she threw him into a molten metal pit, and he died. Like, he's dead. But then he kept showing up, and every time that she took blood from him in any fight afterwards, it was someone else. It wasn't the same guy she was ever fighting. But in the last time he showed up, aka the time before this time, she took the blood again, and it was the same as the very first guy. So he's somehow back. Inquisitor has somehow returned. So we see them talking about like, all right, what can we figure out about where this all needs to be or whatever. And they figured out that the location of the people who killed themselves were all locations where the Inquisitor was beaten during previous fights in history. One of them didn't have anything to do with La Sangra. It was actually a completely separate character who was around in the 1960s who beat him. But one of them isn't showing up. One of them doesn't have a death at the location. So they figured that must be the place where the Inquisitor is actually hanging out. So they go there at night, and S.H.A.D.E and Montpellier just take care of all the guards and let Lysandra get inside and let her have her fight with Inquisitor. But as they basically make super short work of the guards because they're just guys and S.H.A.D.E is S.H.A.D.E, Montpellier says like, all right, I can handle the rest. You want to go in there and make sure she can handle herself? Go. And so she gets inside. He gets inside and sees them already mid-fight, having their back and forth. And basically they're just having a debate over morals of like, oh, you're killing these innocent people. And it's like, innocent? They're not innocent. They're sinners. Look at their vain, pompous whores. And as soon as Inquisitor makes the comment that they are nothing but sodomites, and S.H.A.D.E pops in and was just like, excuse me, that's very rude. Some of my best friends are sodomites. And we see it's a standoff between Inquisitor on one side and Lysandra and S.H.A.D.E on the other. But the narration says that, little did I suspect within the next 5 minutes I would be forced to use my powers in perhaps the most spectacular display I have ever done. So yeah, we got a big fight coming up, and they're just pimping it here. I think it's fine. I think, unless there's some reason for it that I'm not aware of, having not read the Starman series, I don't feel like Montpellier is really necessary of a character to have here. It just feels like, if they're setting something up for later, that'd be fine, but it just feels like another one of those things like we had in the Darwin Cook issue, where it's like, here's a bunch of characters that add flavor to the backdrop of what the S.H.A.D.E is doing, but it's also not going to come back in any major way. So yeah, it just felt like it slowed it down a little bit. And I'm okay with him as a character. He's fine. It just didn't feel necessary. But no, this issue, it was fine. Nothing really stood out as like amazing. There was no super awesome cool fight scene in this one. It was just more of a, all right, we got to find Inquisitor. He set up this Da Vinci Code-esque puzzle thing going on, and we managed to figure out what it was because of it, and blah, blah, blah. It's fine. It's just, it didn't really have as much to say as, say, issue 5 or anything like that. No, not 5. 4. Yeah. So I'm liking it still. It's just hit a little bit of a slow patch, but if the next issue teases to be believed, it's going to get real fast, real quick. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 6, and I hope to see it improve from here. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this March 14th, 2012. And you know what? For 16 comics, I think we made pretty good time. I mean, I won't know until the edit's done and I actually see what the time is, but it feels like we made pretty good time. And I actually almost kind of flirted with real critical opinions of some things. So, hey, that's cool. But let's not spoil the whole good time thing with me rambling on now. Let's talk about what's coming out next week. March 21st, 2012 has 14 comics, and they are Batman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern Corps, Captain Atom, Justice League, DC Universe Presents, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, and Legion of Superheroes. All of those, the number 7 issues. No miniseries this time. So yeah, that'll pretty much do it for me. Go ahead and tell you what the Twitter is. It's at DC Comics Podcast. Go ahead and follow there for nothing of interest. Also, we have a Patreon. That is Mild Fuzz TV, all one word, Mild Fuzz TV. Go ahead and pay there for something of interest. And I, as I said at the beginning, am late for my vacation. So, sayonara, suckers. And always remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.